Доброго вечора.
Good evening. We welcome you at our program of the Lectorium of the Animation Festival of Linoleum, and today we will be speaking about the interactive project The Sixties, The Lost Treasures, about the famous Ukrainian female artists, and together with us we have the project manager of this project, Sofia Razumenko, and the producer Olena Golubeva, who is also the producer of the studio of Red Dog, Czerwona Sobaka, and also the head of the Ukrainian Association of Animation. So I give the floor to you. Good evening, everyone. I'm really grateful to Linoleum as the association which has been created in 2017, since the first day is annually with Linoleum, and this project in particular are presented for the first time in Ukraine at Linoleum. We are waiting for a long time, almost for a year. And I will present Sofia in more detail. Sofia is the press secretary of the association, and for 4 years she was dealing and is still dealing with its promotion. She's a professional journalist, and altogether she's an inspiration for this project. So we had a very hard task to present the Ukrainian culture at the broader level, and when Sofia came with this project, I understood that it's really so personal and it is so relevant that my task was just to say, yes, let us do that. As for me, the 60s is the riddle. And I'm from the east of Ukraine myself, where it was possible not to study Ukrainian, and the Ukrainian language was studied, and I began to study it when I was a student. So for me it's also the lost treasure. So thanks to this project I've visited the Museum of the 60s, which is just here, around the corner from here. And when I watched it, I felt this energy, because we've chosen 5 female artists, and this is the power story which, in spite of anything, they transformed their life around themselves. Maybe they lived in their fantasies, but still, those are very inspiring resources for me, and even at some moment I felt this protest spirit. This project has been supported by the Ukrainian Institute. We are very grateful to it for that they believed in us, and they really promote it at the international level. I believe that mostly thanks to them, this project as a media project got to the finals of the pitching of the Annecy Festival, and it was presented as an art interactive project. And I never hoped, in fact, even in my boldest dreams, that such complicated fates of these women, their creativity is so touching for each of us. So now I give the floor. Well, I wanted to say a bit that we've got different blocks, both organizational and creative ones, and we may drive your attention to some of them more. We will be grateful for any questions online and here in the process, as we've got the powerful scientific block, a powerful museum block, the powerful creative one. So now I give the floor to Sofia, as her origin is from the family of the people of the 60s. This is the creative transformation of her family experience and creativity. So Sofia, the most important floor is yours. Hello. First and foremost, I would like to thank for the interest towards this topic that the Ukrainian Association, when I said, well, you know, my grandfather told such stories to me, maybe they will be interesting for someone. and the association supported us. Then we applied with this project for the competition from the Ukrainian Institute, and it supported us. And after that, we began the active work on the project. So why, if I may, would you show my presentation? So why? Those are the artists. We'll come back to them a bit later. I would like to say why I offered that. Because sometimes I make a joke that all my grandparents were to blame for that. They are on the picture. My grandfather is mustached. Because since my early childhood, I heard the stories which they told about their friends, about other points, because for me those friends were just Uncle Mykola, whom we visited when I was a little kid, or Aunt Lubov, whom we visited in Bucha. And I always listened to them, and it seemed to be some daily things, how they cooked vareniks in our Khrushchev-built apartment where I grew up. And when I grew up, in fact, and decided not just to study history, but to listen to history at school, because I was not that interested in history then, I got to know that there used to be such a movement, the 60s movement. Those were the dissidents who were suffering for their views and actions. Sometimes they had to pay with their health and their life, because Uncle Mykola turned out to be Mykola Plahotniuk, who spent lots of years in the psychiatric asylum, not just because he had problems with his mental health, but because he had problems with the power. The authorities didn't like his views, that he communicated in Ukrainian, that he supported the dissidents, and this is how he got to the psychiatric asylum. Uncle Luba turned out to be an artist, Lyubov Panchenko, whose creative work was banned for lots of years as well. Her albums with her pictures were banned to publish, and she found herself in the creative process, so she was working in the House of Models. She created wonderful costumes, and in the end of the day we created the photo session in the Museum of the 60s with the costumes created by Ms. Lyubov. And when it was time, and I was working at the studio in the Ukrainian Association of Animation, I understood that these are the times when the people should be told about such people like the 60s. And we decided that it should be done in an interesting way, because just to create the website which we created, which contains information, is not enough. We need to make people interested. We need them to take part even in what they see, and this is how we got an idea of an interactive project. We decided to make games. Well, those are not even games, those are kind of like in points, where you can read about the artists, where you can take part in the events which take place in their life. And we have got 5 female artists who are our main characters, those they are, and we decided to create the story about each of them. As for now, we've got 2 of them, about Alla Gorska and Lyubov Panchenko. By the way, as for Alla Gorska, I was listening this story in my childhood. That's an incredible person. She doesn't only have cool pictures, she also used to be a leader of the 60s movement. She led this movement, people who were not only Ukrainian speaking, but Ukrainian directed, people who would like Ukraine to get independence. She led them, and she paid with her life for that. The scientists say that it's not proved, but still she was killed, she was murdered by the KGB. So, by the way, one more story from my childhood, but I forgot what I wanted to tell you about. So, the project was worked upon by a big team. We worked with the PR agency, but I guess Elena will tell about that more. We were joined by, well, as the center of the history was the lost stained glass window, which they all took part in. We took those 5 artists, and it seemed to us that this stained glass window in the modern world is really connected with such wonderful art designers as brаты, the brothers. So if we come back to our logo of this project, and all of those designs, they are made by brаты, the brothers. They were really inspired, and they said, you know, we didn't even know that the museum of the 60s is just opposite our apartment. We are working here for so many years. And this is the task which is rather important. We were trying to find as crazy people as we are, because we understood that we took a very hard task and we united the coder, the painters. I can tell about more details. Could you show the credits? So, the filling of their life as an interactive part was done by different artists, and the art director was Olga Gavrilova and Andriy Naumenko, and Andriy has created the game design and how it will look like, the gaming mechanics. Oleg Smysh coded all of that at the level, because in fact the foreign partners say 2 games is a bit too much for 3 months and for such amount of money, so never do that, anything like that. But we also were kept by this story, we were magically grasped by it, and by the way, we shot some interviews because we've got live characters. Besides Alla Gorska, who is not with us anymore, lots of events were taking place, if you remember, when the mosaic was ruined. Yes, they created the mosaic with the name of Shevchenko mother, and this mosaic was done to commemorate the anniversary of the birthday of Shevchenko. That was 1964. The mosaic was located in the hall of the red building of the main building of the university named after Shevchenko. Yes, not the mosaic, but the stained glass window. And of course, all of the artworks which were created by the artists, they should have been approved by the higher authorities. And when just before the opening, it was the eve before the opening of the stained glass window, before the official events for the anniversary of the Shevchenko's birthday, when the authorities saw this stained glass window, they said that ideologically it does not correspond to the ideals of the Soviet power and it should be ruined. So in fact it was an artwork. It was totally broken. Well, because it was made of glass, it was easy to break it. So we decided that we need to renovate it, but in the modern world everything can be renovated with the help of the new technologies, and we decided to create a kind of animation of this stained glass window, where when you have some of the games and play them, in the end of the day you can see how the stained glass window is combined, constructed, and what was the outcome. Of course, we communicated with the artists who were taking part in the creation of the stained glass windows. In the Museum of the 60s we have found the pictures, and even the pictures of the stained glass window do not exist, so we found the sketches. And according to those sketches and memories, we totally reconstructed the stained glass window. We will never show it to you. You can see it if you play the games. And as for the artists, Halina Semykina is 95 years old now, if I'm not mistaken. Lyubov Panchenko is a bit younger, but she's also in a very respected age. So when we created the projects, we had also Lyudmila Semykina alive. So we communicated with all of them, and it was so pleasant when we showed the concept at the very beginning. We showed them the concept of the project, and there are such words as hooligans in art. We were afraid that the people of older times will never understand that. They will say, we are not the hooligans. Why do you name it like that? But in fact, they were really perceiving the concept of the project well. They were happy that in the modern world they are not only not forgotten, but there are some people who really like their creative works, and we would like to bring these artworks to the broader audience. And I think that lots of people will like those works. Further in the presentation we've got several examples of the works, and at the website we collected a rather big number of works of the artists. You can watch all of them, because we also have the archive pictures of the artists, and all of that is also the part of the project. The biographies of all of the artists which we collected from the artists themselves, and also from their relatives and friends, and from the scientists, of course. We were closely cooperating with the scientists. As for me, the collection of the clothes looks so modern even now. If I hadn't known that it has been created not now, I would never think that it was done long ago. It's rather relevant. That's what I think. Yes, we will show it a bit. Okay, a bit. Here they are. Those are the costumes which were created by Lyubov Panchenko. She, well, besides working in the House of Models, she also sewed the costumes for Lyudmila Semykina for her friends. Just imagine, in the 60s, the people were walking along the streets in such costumes. It was very unusual, and in spite of that the authorities followed them, it even more made attracted attention to those costumes. They were not afraid to do that, both the artists and their friends.
And by the way, about the story from grandfather and grandmother, they were saying that they would walk up to Shevchenko's monument to put flowers in honor of his anniversary, and the following day they had representatives of KGB come into their work and called them in for conversations with the questions, why did you go to Shevchenko's monument, why not to Lenin's monument? What's that about, and how you could have done it, something like that. So this was an opposition to the authorities, and even people who were not taken to mental hospitals or to the camps, they still suffered from having these pro-Ukrainian views. So let us talk a little bit about the way the project was created. I'll tell more about the organizational part, because that's 5 authors. So we had a question, first of all, of copyright, because we could arrange it directly with those who are still alive. We also talked to some heirs, and some works were given to the museum. So we cooperated with the museums. There was huge research work done, and I'm very grateful to the researchers who started it in advance. Even before we had confirmations we're going to have resources for the project. And for them it was also an important part, because people dedicated their whole lives to science, to research. We had rich discussions, because scientific language is a bit dry and it mesmerizes you. But for this project to be suitable for wide audience, and also to engage international audience, where we talked about all aspects of 1960s, and the international audience mostly doesn't know, and I mean, I myself also didn't know too much about it at the beginning. So we had help from PR agency. We had very powerful PR people, headed by Anna Hensitska. And when they told us that they are going to make short TikTok videos, we said, well, we were ready for contemporary methods, but not as much. We said, 60s TikTok, that's going to be very weird. And they said, no, 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 no. We want to experiment and believe us, it's going to be, we're just going to check the hypothesis. Well, unfortunately, when were not three of us today because it was a great and excellent bit of work, and as there were five artists, that means that there were five teams who were developing all this. There was game being made, artistic concept, and all. Then it was conducted like that. And actually, the integration happened on the website. We started on the 16th of December, and in February we already applied to ANSI as an interactive project. As for preparing the materials, there were photos of paintings in the 60s museum. Fortunately, they were brought to the museum because before that they had been Lyubov Panchenko's house in Bucha, and naturally they weren't taken after. And as actually most paintings were created made of textiles, they were actually textile applications, then of course they already started to go to waste. But a couple of years ago, the museum started storing those pictures. You already can see them in the museum. And by the way, in the nearest time, there's going to be an album with the pictures by Lyubov Panchenko. That is probably the first in very many years with regard to the fact that the Soviet Union, her works were forbidden. It's 30 years of independence now. And finally, this album with cool pictures going to see the world, and the world is going to see the album. So yes, there were photos of the pictures, photos of the costumes. All of this were huge layers of work. By the way, we had the owner of private collection writing to us. He also has pictures by Alla Horska, and he sent us pictures of those paintings and actually asked us to add those photos to the website. That's great. As for the development of the script for the game, at first the script was written by the researcher Lyubov Krupnik, but that's true that art language and science language are a bit different. So that is why Andriy Naumenko, our art director, based on this initial script, he developed a more gaming scenario. We're going to watch short video from Andriy because he had no possibility to be present today, but there he tells how he worked on the game, about the life of Alla Horska, also about the life of Lyubov Panchenko, Olga Gavrilova, and Liza Sinkova were the ones who developed the script. All this was based on those real events which took place in the lives of Lyubov Panchenko, but they are sieved through artistic vision. They are at that angle, they presented at that angle, and then the implementation of the project started. This is a rather diligent work, meticulous. When you're already working, at some moment you already start losing yourself and you don't understand anymore who is going to be interested in that and why are we actually doing that. And at some point you have this feeling like, well, maybe I should give it all up. If there were no deadlines, we could have postponed it. And animation is so good, it's the same thing. You draw and draw the same thing because it's an attractive animated game. Then this is actually a huge piece of work, which is rather monotonous and not too fun and not dynamic at all. But when you're already releasing the project into the world, you're releasing the game, at some point, for example, you already actually expect something's going to happen. And thanks to the fact that the whole team has worked out very well and made a very interesting project, and thanks to the work of PR agency, of course, the publication started. And these publications actually have become so numerous that you already understand that, well, and each one is interested in something else. Because actually now the digital world is looking for new ways and methods, and it seemed to us that if Eastern European Animation Association supported us and actually produced a post, an article about that, they are interested in that you can actually present your art. They were interested both in the art component and in the concept, in which way you can work with the local story and how you can make it interesting. Because for us, that's interesting. Somebody's just interested in the drawings, a drawing by an artist. Somebody would be interested in the story, and somebody would be interested in that movement in general and the social significance of it right now. So for me personally, it was a surprise when we got to NC, because NC is a rather commercially oriented event, but still they are also interested how you could work with local or global art. And I'm very happy that this project is happening from the association, because it cannot be private. It can only be from a public organization which deals with promoting art, social stand, and bringing back the identity and all that. So for me, this is a project which went beyond pure art, and it now has lots of aspects. Are we going to watch something now? Yeah, by the way, another great thing to mention, our game is in English, and I get that call from Lyubov Krupnik, the researcher, and she asks me, they often call me from schools and ask me, when is there going to be a game about Alagorska in Ukrainian, so that it's possible to use it for learning in schools. And that's really great that teachers approach learning from this new perspective, and that they're trying to get the students interested in this way. And now I propose to listen about the game itself. There's going to be a small episode from Andrei Naumenko about the way he was creating the game and how exactly he did that. Well, while we are getting ready, now I can say that this was close cooperation of Andrei Naumenko with a program developer, because you can come up with anything you want, but okay, it has already started. What about the sound? Why is there no sound? Actually, we didn't write a script or anything, but when we were studying the materials which Sonia found for the artists of the 60s, there were different stories from their lives, and specifically the bio of Alla Horska herself. Everywhere there was the apartment of Alla Horska is the universal background. And we decided to try and tell the story of Alla through her apartment. And that is why we have not a script, but more like a structure. And now I'll try to show it to you. Here. If you look at it in general, it was like that. But now I'm going to describe that all in more detail. So through Alla's apartment, we tried to show it through one room, and how during the whole life this room was changing its appearance when Alla lived in this apartment. So this is a story from real life. The way it happened, the way it was then described, we took that and we presented it in this way. And it seemed to me that this worked well. So we have 3 chapters. That's Alla's childhood, her adulthood, coming of age, and well, the reprisals and the rest of the 1960s started. Here in the beginning, we're going to see. Okay, it's going to be like that. So, here is the very beginning of Allah's life. Here, the apartments still belong to Allah's parents. They are this proper Soviet people. They have Lenin's portrait on the wall, and everything is fine. And Allah is a pioneer. And in the game, you can look at it all. You can put it right, and we all have the radio, and we have notes, which mother writes to Allah, and also flowers. There is a kitty. You saw the kitty sleeping. So we can look around it all. Then, with the passing of life, Allah becomes older. She becomes an artist. The room changes. That's according to real life story. It transforms into a real creative workshop where Allah's mother tries to constantly take something away and tries to bring it all to order, but she doesn't manage. And in the end, when it's all sad, this apartment turns into refuge for artists. And Allah lives here, and this is all connected with her. So we can see these are all Allah's ways. The example of her apartment. So something like that. And now we'll come back to the structure. So we have the first one, childhood. Then we added the transfer to the following chapter through small mini games to the following chapters. The mini games are also based on the life and the stories from the 60s artists, and I can describe them in brief. Here we have starting her life. I already told you about that. Here she becomes older, and she is not really about Ukraine, and she's not even from Ukraine. That's even more interesting in the story. Then she has that period of life. By pressing a certain trigger, we launch the following mini game. The first one. This is a mini game about Allah starting to learn Ukrainian, get interested in everything Ukrainian. So in this mini game, we see Allah who goes somewhere on a ship with Sveta, Kalina below. So they are already there. We are collecting here letter by letter the whole phrase. The phrase is fight and you will win. This is a quote from Shevchenko. The boat approaches the shore. Allah goes out and goes on, and there is a panorama. We see that she has come to Shevchenko, who is painting pictures, and Allah gives him a branch, and this is how Allah becomes Ukrainian. So then, after this mini game, we are transported to the very peak of Allah's turbulent life. Here we also have a mini game. We're trying to bring order, how her mother would do, but we cannot manage anything. And then afterwards, we get into the second mini game. The second mini game tells us about the turbulent life of 60s artists, the way they were meeting each other, and it is based on the story from their life, how they will get in together, making pierogi and putting various objects into those, and then they look to see who is going to get which object into which piece. They were laughing and having fun. So this is a game about memory. We are shown open pierogi, and we know which of them contain some objects, then they're all closed, and then by memory we're supposed to, without having a pierogi with other objects, to collect a certain amount of edible ones. So we won, we are good. And then we are transported to the third chapter, where the reprisals started. I'm going to show you it again. Here we're on the table we have a letter, which in the 60s artists, after signing that list, that letter, the reprisal started. So the game tells all about it. As soon as we sign this letter, we have the third-minute game starting, which is also based on the life and on the way, on the period they were fighting, all that. So we have this huge, big, black, squishy thing with tentacles, which starts absorbing objects one by one in the room. But not to allow that, we collect puzzles from the art of 1960s artists. As soon as the small puzzle is already assembled, the tentacle absorbs not a person but an artistic object, and step by step it draws back. So we feed them art and not people. This is based on the life story, the way they collected money to help those who went under reprisals. They sold their artworks, and in this way they collected this money to help them. So here we win over this squishy thing in the third-minute game, and then we're transported to the fourth final part, which tells us the story about Allah. In Shevchenko Day, organizing some performance, she wore bright clothes, and against the background of this grey crowd, she looked in a very provocative and a brave way with bright flowers. She went and she brought flowers to Shevchenko's monument. Here we are also helping Allah reach the monument, and we have this squishy thing trailing behind her as well. Allah approaches, she puts the flowers, but then those tentacles still take her, and then there are only flowers at Shevchenko's remaining here in the beginning.
So first we have the flowers with live Shevchenko, and then we have the flowers to the monument of Shevchenko when we bring the flowers there and they are left there. In a nutshell, this was the structure and the script. Okay, now as for the questions, the outcome, the comparison of the expectations and realities. Well, technically, as you can understand here, everything is obvious. How much the artist has to draw and what exactly, how much of animation and which exactly is there, and the coder, the IT guy, knows how many mini games to code, what will happen in them, and how it's all of that it can be suited in one sheet of paper. I show you one working scheme. When it emerged in the beginning of the project, we had it up till the end of it. We were working and living with it. It turned out to be very convenient. As for expectations and reality, well, in reality, everything turned out to be a bit simpler in comparison with what we planned, but I may say that still we had a nice result. I don't know. Maybe we didn't have enough time for something. The expectation was that it should be a bit better working at different devices. But as always, you need more time for that. I'll make the picture like this. But what we accomplished, I think that's good for us. The amount of animation and the illustrations and all the rest. I guess that's it. If you've got any additional questions, please pose them to Sonia, I guess, and I will say goodbye to you. Oh, well, we even had enough time whoever finds in this game, we have an Easter egg inside, so you can have this kind of entertainment and try to find it. That's it. Now definitely I say goodbye to all of you. And by the way, Andriy was very modest when he said that they were working with the coder, with the artists according to this scheme, but for the coder, what I was saying in the beginning, for the IT guy, he described the 30-page detailed manual how to work with that. I will tell separately that we've got a wonderful composer, Dmitro Kozinets, yes, Kozinets, who created... He just totally delves us deeper with his music and sounds into this period. And that's an important component of the game. I do remember some of our troubles, besides being different platforms and it should open anywhere and never to stuck, in spite of the story to be more of a prototype still, because we have planned more full-scale games in art and we'd like to develop the idea of the 60s movement and to fill this website up with some additional interactive games. And by the way, as for music, when Dmitro composed the music to the games, he was inspired, first of all, by the music of the 60s, and secondly, not by the music which was allowed and broadcast by the Soviet authorities, but more of the underground music, and of course Ukrainian folk music. But here, Andriy in the video said that you can push the button on the radio and listen to the radio. The idea was that this is an apartment of the party employee. It's very Soviet, so the task was for Dima that out of the radio there should be some classical Soviet music, but it should be composed from scratch, so we never took anybody's works. And then Dima told me that he will never agree to compose Soviet music, because for him it was a big torture. We were communicating for a long time, and at the end of the day we were inspired by a bit of ridiculous ideas. In particular, we remembered Neverhood, the game. If you remember Neverhood, how he was speaking. And it was a bit of a sarcastic composition which is played from the radio. It adds a bit more, because Andriy Naumenko with this game wanted to show it through the daily life. It's all clickable, and there are some of the things until you click all of that, you never know which toys the Soviet children were playing with and what were the pioneers' ties which they wore. So this idea is really mesmerizing, that through the daily stuff we use, which some people know, some people don't, together with the music, they just immerse you into this daily life, and unexpectedly you are becoming, just for a moment, a bit of Alla Gorska. And those are the shots from the game which Andriy told about. As for the Easter egg, I will never tell you what that is and where it is. I will tell you that the Easter egg is a kind of a surprise which is embedded in the game and which is possible to find. There is the spoiler for one of the Easter eyes, the Veronik, which is winking at us, and I will not tell you about the second Easter egg. These are also the screenshots from what Andriy told us about. And the second game is devoted to Lyubov Panchenko. It is done in a totally different way, in a totally different style, and even the principle of the work of the game is a bit different, right? So everything was done together with the coders, and this is the picture of Lyubov Panchenko, and these are her pictures. The upper picture, I even grew up with it because it always hung at my grandparents' wall, and Later, when we visited Lyubov Panchenko, we saw some other pictures of hers, the ones which I told you about, which were done with the canvas which is used, the fabric which is done for the coats. Yes, and she took those parts of cloth, of woolen cloth, where it was done at work, and she brought it home and created lots of wonderful pictures. They are very numerous, and all of them are in the museum of the Sixties. We are short of time. I'd like to answer the Q&A session. I will tell you what stage we achieved. As we got into the finals of the international pitching at Annecy Festival, we additionally won a very specific grant from Vidrodzenia Fund, and we will get so much money as much as we crowdfund at Spilnokosht crowdfunding platform. It's the new experience for us because we never believed that Spilnokosht can crowdfund a lot, but it turns out that there are some weird sponsors and angels living there, because it's obvious when, for instance, you understand that there are some friends or some diaspora representatives, as the game is English-speaking, it's English language, it's obvious, it's understandable. And of course we conduct an internal investigation about each investment. But there are some of the points we cannot investigate. We understand that those are totally different people, but at Spilnokosht, at the crowdfunding platform, we can see that they help lots of projects. So I advertise this Spilnokosht platform with my prejudices. I considered that it is totally not a substantiated history, and in spite of my prejudice, we are almost in the finals. We have a month left, and we don't even know. We have an investment for which we give you a gift of a photo session in the folk costume, the costume from the collection, and we don't know which angel we should offer that to. So this is the previously prepared different gifts about each of the artists, because those are different designer stories, and we are planning now for this grant, which we will get, to create some of them. You can choose different ones. We'll leave them here, the postcards. So we offer to create the Ukrainian localization, what I told that they want to use in the schools. Well, of course, we create the English language version, but for the Ukrainian language people, they are interested as well as we were. Those were the conditions of the first grant, and we will also create the plan for the next game. Yes, we're going on with the game. You can see Galina Sevruk's works on the screen, and the next game will be about the life and creative work of Galina Sevruk. And she has really cool things. Sevruk, when we created it, her in the Hall of Interest Hotel, there was a big work of hers. There was first a piece of news that it was totally ruined, but now we have the idea that this work was transported to St. Sophia's Cathedral. When we created this project, we got different news. And the artist, who's our character, we are getting ready to get to this hotel, and it turns out to be ruined. So this is the kind of mysterious things around it. But still, I personally love this historical resource, which can be felt in the power of the creative works of those women, in the power of their civil position. It seems to me, first of all, the story that art cannot be beyond politics. That's about my personal concerns, and I'm really happy that this source of identity exists, and that is invaluable and endless. So this is the time for questions, I think, because we can speak for a long time. I will tell you. Well, I will click through the works of Lyudmila Semikina. You can watch all of that at the website. It's so obvious at the website. That's Annecy Festival. These are the publications in the media. This is our crowdfunding platform of Spilnokosht, and here you can use the QR code to get to the website. And the postcards also have the QR code, which will lead to the Spilnokosh, the crowdfunding platform. But this platform includes all the links to the games and the websites. Are there any questions? If not, maybe there are any questions online? No? Then thank you so much that you joined us. Thank you, Olena and Sophia, for such an interesting game and for the project. Sophia, we love you! We love you as well, all of you. Okay, so if you have time, please come to the Museum of the 60s, and I'm sure that you won't be sorry for that. It's really full of resources in any time and relevant. Thank you.